The most famous fact about archaeology is that you have heard 1,000 times that we've already discovered everything
These carvings
important.
are ancient.
The
Wait, the symbol, it's a
technology has
warning!
revealed all
I
the
have to get this
secrets,
back to
that
camp!
modern science can explain any ancient artifact. But any archaeologist who digs in the field will tell you that this confidence is an illusion. It hides more than it reveals. It merges comfortable theories with impossible evidence and becomes a mystery wrapped in academic denial.
Look at the mass reading on
We
the
look
scale.
at museums
It's
and
showing
see
instability.
just
Check the
explained
waveform.
artifacts
Running a
behind
diagnostic now.
glass. But if you look closer, if you dig deep into the storage rooms, instead of answered questions, we will find things that don't fit in our timeline of human civilization. Today, we will look through the display cases and find what mainstream archaeology tried to hide in the basements of silence. We will see mechanisms that shouldn't exist for thousands of years. We will find out how stones were moved that our cranes cannot lift. We will discover artifacts that rewrite human history. And we will understand why some objects are literally impossible according to everything we know about the ancient world. These mysteries are not just puzzles, they are gigantic cracks in our understanding, the implications of which we
This one
begin
has
to
a distinct
grasp
marking
only
here.
now.
Noted. Checking the
In the
base now.
early
Good.
2000s,
Let's log
when
it.
archaeologists began to catalog the storage rooms of the Baghdad Museum, they faced a problem that put historians in a stupor. They had to explain an object that had been sitting ignored for decades. They brought modern dating equipment, chemical analysis tools, and expert consultants, thinking
This
that the
artifact is the
mystery
key.
would be
It unlocks
solved
a civilization
in a
we
few
thought was
days.
lost forever.
This
Its markings
object
could
was
rewrite
more
history.
than 2,000 years old, but when they analyzed its composition, the numbers made no sense. They measured the materials, tested the construction, examined every detail. The results were impossible. The artifact contained knowledge that shouldn't exist for another 18 centuries. The researchers were shocked. They expected ancient craftsmanship to be primitive, limited
The peak
by
here
available
confirms our
technology.
hypothesis.
But
Yes,
this
and it's
object
consistent with the model.
behaved
I'll check the raw
differently.
data.
The
Good.
more precisely they studied it, the more impossible it seemed. It appeared that someone in ancient Iraq possessed technology that defied the entire timeline of human innovation, as if time had been scrambled, as if the past and future had collided in one small clay jar. Of course, when scientists published their findings, conspiracy theorists immediately seized on the story. People were convinced that the secret of such advanced knowledge is alien intervention. They said that ancient astronauts had taught humans to harness electricity, or that time travelers had left this device behind. The origin of this mystery was mixed with theories that ancient Mesopotamians got their knowledge from the same beings who built Atlantis, or those who came from the sky. How could ordinary clay, copper, and iron create a battery 1,800 years before Alessandro Volta invented the battery? It's just a contradiction to the entire history of technology. But the answer was found not by ancient alien theorists, but by engineers, and it was not in fantasy, but in chemistry. Scientists from multiple universities took samples of this impossible device and drove them through every analysis known to modern science. The result forced them to publish cautiously. The Baghdad battery, a simple clay jar with a copper cylinder and iron rod, was indeed capable of generating electricity. Regular electricity from components that shouldn't work together this way. Ancient Mesopotamians of 2500 BCE made a discovery that would not be replicated until 1800 CE. They understood that certain metals in acidic solution create electrical current. From the point of view of chemistry, the design is perfect. Copper as cathode, iron as anode, acidic liquid as electrolyte, and asphalt seal as insulator. This ancient battery had properties that are undeniable. When recreated, it produces 1.1 volts of electricity. It turned out a device that could electroplate objects with gold or silver, creating gilding that looked like solid precious metal. This Baghdad battery is essentially the earliest electrical engineering in the history of civilization. But if ancient Mesopotamians mastered electricity, then the next mystery shows that another ancient culture understood astronomy at an impossible level, and what they created disappeared for 2,000 years, only to be found in the most unlikely place imaginable.
Any diver who explores Mediterranean shipwrecks will tell you about the ANTIKYTHERA. In 1901, Greek sponge divers were working off the coast of a small island when they discovered a Roman shipwreck. Among the statues and amphora, they found a corroded lump of bronze. For decades, it sat in a museum, ignored, just another piece of oxidized metal from a cargo ship. Then in 1951, someone X-rayed it. Inside the corrosion were gears, dozens of precisely cut bronze gears fitted together in a mechanism so complex that nothing like it would exist again until medieval clockmakers in the 1300s. People claimed this was the world's first computer, but that term doesn't capture how impossible this object is. The ANTIKYTHERA mechanism could predict eclipses, track planetary movements, calculate the Olympic Games cycle, and account for the Moon's irregular orbit. It used epicyclic gearing, a mathematical concept allegedly not discovered until the Middle Ages. Scientists decided to scan this corroded miracle with the most advanced imaging technology available. They mapped every gear, every inscription, every microscopic detail, and the scientific conclusion was stunning. This device is more sophisticated than any known mechanism for the next 1,000 years. And it's not about ancient genius being underestimated, but about a technological discontinuity that makes no sense. Any engineer will tell you that complex mechanisms don't appear fully formed. There should be simpler prototypes, cruder versions, evidence of development. But we've found nothing. The ANTIKYTHERA mechanism appears in 100 BCE at the peak of complexity, then vanishes. No similar devices exist in the archaeological record. It's as if someone built a smartphone in ancient Greece, then the knowledge was completely lost. So the mechanism is alone. It stands as an impossible island of technology, surrounded by a sea of ancient tools that make sense. But if the Greeks built impossible computers, then in Egypt they achieved something even more baffling. There they created precision that seems impossible even today. When we say ancient Egypt, the image appears of pyramids and hieroglyphics, of pharaohs and gold. This is the picture that everyone knows. But if you go to Saqqara, to the underground chambers beneath the step pyramid, this comfortable image shatters into dust. There are no primitive chisel marks, no rough stone cutting, and no explanation that satisfies physics. There is only granite carved with mathematical precision that modern tools struggle to replicate. And it's been there for 4,500 years. Travelers who first entered these chambers often didn't understand what they were seeing. They saw massive stone boxes weighing 70 tons, carved from single pieces of granite, with internal corners at perfect right angles and surfaces smooth as glass. They thought these were sarcophagi carved by patient craftsmen over many years. But if you measure them, you can see that patience doesn't create tolerances of 0.002 inches across surfaces measuring several meters. This level of precision in Saqqara is a real impossibility. It looks like it should require industrial machinery, computer-guided tools, diamond-tipped cutting equipment. Yet in fact, it was created in the age of copper chisels and stone hammers. It's older than the Great Pyramid by 200 years, and the most incredible thing is what it's made of. Locals have been studying these granite boxes for centuries, trying to understand the cutting method. After all, how can you cut granite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, with copper? Copper is softer than granite. It's like trying to cut steel with butter. It shouldn't work.
People were convinced that the technique here is connected with something lost, which doesn't allow modern engineers to replicate it. The solution to this mystery shocked modern stonemasons with its implications. The ancient Egyptians were in a situation where they had to work granite, but their tools were inadequate, and they invented a technique that we still cannot fully explain. They used abrasive slurry, wet sand mixed with harder minerals, combined with copper saws and tube drills. But there was one element that turned crude sawing into precision machining: technique. Not just technique, but understanding of crystal structure, of grain direction, of thermal shock, of percussion flaking. The ancient masons knew granite's weaknesses better than the stone knew itself. It turned out to be knowledge passed master to apprentice, where feeling the stone was more important than the tool. This precision survived dynasties, conquered death itself, and waited in darkness. But if engineers in Saqqara fought against the hardness of stone, then in South America they had to face a challenge that defied gravity itself. And what they accomplished remained inexplicable until yesterday. Until recently, historians and engineers considered ancient megalithic construction to be solved. It seemed that the only mystery was manpower, thousands of workers pulling stones with ropes. This is logical. The more people, the bigger the stone you can move. Tourists visiting Saqqara and Baalbek see massive blocks and accept the rope and ramp explanation. Tens of thousands of workers, decades of labor, problem solved. This comfortable theory was an axiom until precision laser scanning with ultra-high resolution appeared. In 2018, a team of researchers conducted perhaps the most detailed analysis of megalithic sites in history. They measured weights, angles, positions, creating computational models of the physics involved. And when they ran the simulations, they noticed something that shattered the conventional explanation. In some places, the stones were too heavy for any number of humans to move using Bronze Age technology. It wasn't labor limitations, it was physics. At Baalbek in Lebanon, 3 stones called the trilithon each weigh approximately 800 tons. Not 80 tons, 800 tons. Modern cranes rated for 800 tons cost tens of millions of dollars, require massive support infrastructure, and cannot navigate rough terrain. Yet these stones were quarried half a mile away, transported uphill, and lifted 20 feet onto a platform. This completely turned our understanding of ancient construction capabilities upside down. The megaliths were not moved by human muscle power passively. They were transported using techniques we don't understand. When ancient engineers looked at an 800-ton block, they saw something we don't see. Perhaps they used counterweights we haven't found. Perhaps they exploited geological features we don't recognize. Perhaps they understood physics in ways we've forgotten. And each site reveals methods that seem tailored to local conditions, as if the ancients were experimenting, solving the impossible problem differently each time. This discovery showed how limited our assumptions about ancient capabilities are. They moved stones so massive that we can barely conceive the engineering required. But there are mysteries that are hidden not by weight, but by precision so perfect it seems inhuman. Some secrets of the ancient world exist at the microscopic level, invisible to the casual observer. Look at the ancient Peruvian site of Ollantaytambo. You will see walls of enormous polygonal blocks fitted together like a jigsaw puzzle. For a long time, archaeologists and tourists looked at these walls with simple admiration. The stones are large and they fit together well. Impressive, but explainable through skilled labor and patience. Many areas looked like standard ancient masonry. Better than average, but nothing extraordinary. They were covered with mortar in the joints, visible gaps between blocks, and normal construction techniques. Visually, this resembled competent stonework, nothing more. In the 2010s, a group of engineers had the idea to do perhaps the most precise measurement of these walls in history. The plan was simple. Use modern laser scanning to create 3D models accurate to fractions of a millimeter. This seemed an interesting documentation project, useful for preservation efforts. The engineers' equipment was ready. But as soon as they took the first detailed scans and looked at the data under magnification, they stopped in disbelief. It turned out that if you look at these walls at the microscopic level, the precision becomes terrifying. The blocks that people had been looking at for centuries were not fitted together well. They were fitted together perfectly. In some places, the gaps between stones measured less than 0.5 millimeters, half the thickness of a credit card, across surfaces measuring several square meters. This laser-mapped precision worked as something that contradicts the tools available in 1450 CE. And nature created nothing by accident. These were engineered surfaces. With invisible measuring tools, they were bringing blocks weighing tons to tolerances that make modern construction look sloppy. They literally created architecture that approaches manufacturing precision. Moreover, these surfaces weren't flat planes that are easy to match. They were irregular three-dimensional puzzles where each block fit its neighbors in complex curves and angles, making the precision even more impossible. It protected the structures from earthquakes, yes, but it also demonstrated knowledge of geometry that shouldn't exist without computers. Without this laser-mapped revelation, we would still think these were just well-fitted stones, but now we know. The ancients achieved precision that we barely understand.
This discovery completely overturned archaeological assumptions around the world. Now, researchers scan ancient sites expecting to find impossible precision. Any attempt to dismiss these capabilities as primitive is now considered intellectual blindness. But if the Peruvians achieved invisible precision, then the next mystery shows that in ancient India, they understood metallurgy at a level that defies corrosion itself. Let's move on to Delhi, 400 CE. You are a metallurgist completing a pillar of iron for a temple. There is only iron ore, charcoal heat, and hammering. No modern metallurgy, no protective coatings, no stainless steel alloys. You create an iron pillar 7 meters tall, weighing 6 tons. You inscribe it with dedication to Vishnu. You leave it standing in the open air. 1,600 years pass. In Europe at that time, iron objects would rust completely within decades. Iron gates crumble. Iron tools become orange dust. Every civilization on Earth knows that iron and oxygen are enemies, that time turns iron into rust, that nothing made of iron survives the centuries unprotected. But the Delhi iron pillar stands today exactly as it stood in 400 CE. Not a speck of rust, not one trace of corrosion. The ancient metallurgists knew something about iron. The modern world struggled for 16 centuries to explain how this was possible. The secret was revealed in 2003 when material scientists finally analyzed the pillar at the microscopic level. It was the first in the world corrosion-proof iron created using a technique we still cannot fully replicate. Only instead of chromium alloys, ancient Indians used phosphorus-rich iron and forge welding techniques. But forget what you think you know about rust protection, where modern coatings and stainless steel are king. This was not just smelting metal, it was the most sophisticated metallurgical knowledge, a real understanding of electrochemistry, for which each smith was working with wisdom passed through generations. The metallurgists used slag-rich iron with precise phosphorus content. Why this exact composition?
Scientists spent decades wondering whether the rust resistance was intentional or accidental. But but historical evidence and modern analysis insist it was deliberate engineering genius. The phosphorus created a protective film, a meso-white layer that forms on the surface and prevents oxygen from reaching the iron below. It was metallurgy that worked with chemistry instead of fighting it. They didn't just forge strong iron, they forged immortal iron. The pillar could stand for another 16 centuries without corroding, naturally maintaining its protective layer, self-renewing its shield against time. But the technique only worked during specific smelting conditions. The ancient Indians had to control temperature, phosphorus content, and hammering patterns during forging to create the perfect protective composition. And if the forging was critical, examination was used. Master smiths would test the iron's sound, its color during heating, its behavior under the hammer. By listening and watching, they could tell if the iron would last forever or fail within years. Imagine this mastery. The knowledge was passed from master to apprentice in a chain. One smith would train for decades. In time, his student would begin creating rust-proof iron. In years, that student could identify perfect iron just by striking it. A wave of knowledge flew across generations faster than any written formula could teach. The priests in Delhi could commission eternal monuments because the iron itself was the preservation. This technique worked for centuries. It turned ordinary iron into an immortal metal with instant rust immunity. It seemed that such knowledge could not be lost because rust had nothing that could defeat this composition. But history teaches us one cruel lesson. The most brilliant techniques, perfected over centuries of trial, fall not from technical failure and not from inferior results. They fall from invasion and cultural destruction. The Delhi iron pillar was created around 400 CE. It was the pinnacle of metallurgical achievement, proof of chemistry mastered without laboratories. Generations of knowledge, thousands of forgings perfected, exhaustion of experimentation, all for one single purpose: to create iron that would stand forever. Engineers invented phosphorus-rich composition, perfected forge welding techniques, created rust-proof monuments. And so, over the following centuries, the technique was lost completely. How did this happen? Did the iron crack and the method become unreliable? Or did invaders destroy the smithing guilds? The truth turned out to be more prosaic, cynical, and terrifying in its predictability. No one forgot the technique because it failed. There were no metallurgical flaws that made the method obsolete. Islamic conquests of India, being not only military campaigns but also cultural upheavals, disrupted the Hindu smithing guilds. The knowledge that required master-to-apprentice teaching, that depended on oral tradition and hands-on experience, this knowledge died with the masters. The technique didn't fall to rust, it fell to silence. The smiths who knew the exact phosphorus content were killed or dispersed. The apprentices who would have carried the knowledge forward never completed their training. The sacred traditions were broken, and slowly, inevitably, the secret of rust-proof iron faded into legend, leaving only one pillar standing in Delhi as eternal proof. This is what historians call the paradox of the iron pillar. You can create the most perfect metallurgy in the world, use brilliant chemistry, forge metal with immortal properties, and prove it works for 16 centuries. But all this becomes a lost mystery if the people who know the technique die. The pillar was an ideal metallurgical achievement, but it depended on humans. And humans are mortal. Invasion, conquest, the collapse of guilds, these are the forces that no rust-proof iron can resist. The iron intended to last forever eventually played a cruel joke. It survived because it was indestructible, but the knowledge of how to make it was not.
We started our journey with the comfortable myth that archaeology has explained everything.
and ended up with a truth that is much more humbling and mysterious than any ancient alien theory. We saw that history is not just a solved puzzle scattered across museums. These are complex technological artifacts we're still deciphering. This is electrochemistry, where ancient Mesopotamians created batteries 1,800 years early. This is computational astronomy, where Greeks built analog computers that vanished from history. This is impossible precision, where Egyptians carved granite smoother than we can today. This is physics-defying construction, where cultures moved 800-ton stones without modern machinery. This is microscopic perfection, where Peruvian blocks fit with sub-millimeter gaps. And this is rust-proof metallurgy that modern science still cannot fully replicate. But the most important discovery we made today concerns not the artifacts, but the implications. These mysteries, scattered across continents and millennia, created by cultures that never met, all share something profound. They represent knowledge at the edge of what should be possible with available technology. Every year, millions of people visit museums of different nations, languages, and beliefs. They look at these artifacts and feel the same thing. They tremble before human capability. The objects did not fulfill their original purposes. Batteries were lost, computers were forgotten, techniques vanished, but they fulfilled a purpose their makers did not even think about. They preserved questions that force us to admit how little we truly understand. And perhaps, standing in these museums and looking at objects that should not exist, we should think neither about ancient aliens, nor time travelers, nor about supernatural powers. We have to think that even our most confident explanations of the past will once be proven incomplete. And this is probably the most important lesson that these 6 archaeological mysteries teach us.